This is Me, I Am Mental, the podcast. A quick disclaimer. The content you find here is neither intended to be therapy or diagnosis. It is provided for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to Me I'm Mental, the podcast, where we discuss all things mental. We aim to provide factual, credible, useful, and engaging content on mental health. My name is Charles Adede. I'm very, very excited today. We are hosting Dr. Linda Nyamute, all the way from Ksum City. We will get to know Linda a little more further down the line. We are carrying on with the theme of violence and mental health. This being the mental health, part of the mental health campaign that is being run by Kenya Psychiatrists Association. In the last episode, we were honored to host Dr. Chitai Murabula. I'm sure you have had a chance to view that episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you haven't, please go check it out on our channel, which is Me I'm Mental KE. That is a YouTube channel. While we're on that, let us also do a bit of housekeeping. So we are new in this space. We would like to seek your assistance in spreading the word so that we are partners in this journey of creating mental health awareness, because we do believe it's a very, very significant thing in our lives today. Mental health is a thing that touches on everybody's lives, but probably does not receive the attention it should be. So kindly follow us on our channel. That is YouTube channel. Subscribe. Follow us on our social media. You'll find a lot more content on our website, which is www.meiammental.me. I keep saying I'm the clever chap who came up with that URL. So yes, and participate however you can. Ask questions, contribute. If you do need to join us and participate here as a guest as well, you can reach out to us. And without much further ado, let us go straight to Daktari. So, Daktari, karibu sana.
Thank you.
As usual, we would allow you to introduce yourself by telling us a whole story about where it all started. Ulizaliwa wapi? I know. We always want to, start up all the mic and go get all historical on you. I'm sure many of our viewers and audiences want to relate with someone in a more personal way. So a bit about your childhood, schooling, how you ended up being a doctari, how you ended up in psychiatry, and what it's been like.
Okay, so as you mentioned, Nyamute, Linda is my name. Before the prefix, I was born where? The hospital where everyone was born, Pumwani.
Yes.
Yes. My childhood was, I think I was quite naughty child, if I can say. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think it's what I was quite inquisitive, was quite, curious is the word. But anyway, my primary school, quite a number of schools, kept moving places.
Okay.
However, at least high school, it's boarding, so you're able to stay in one place. I went to the Pangani Girls High School.
Mm-hmm. Footbridge.
Forget the rumors you heard about it. It was a nice school, please.
Okay.
Yes. After that, went to the University of Nairobi for medical school. How did I land in medical school? Well, I can just say it was just by default. I finished school. Normally, there'd be that period, 2-year period where you wait to enter school. I think there's no way I was going to it for 2 years. I was getting really bored. You know, you do a course, you've gone for computer, you finished. I went for a course on music, vocals, finished. You're in charge doing all these ex-can programs, things. That, okay, there was no way I was going to do 2 years. So I was ready for university. And I wouldn't say I was quite like, I want to go do medicine. Yeah, I was neither here nor there, which is where a lot of teenagers are when they finish school.
Yes.
You know, some know what they want to do. And then there's a whole group that maybe wants things and maybe they're not too sure. Plus what I wanted to do, my parents were not keen on it.
Pray tell.
I wanted to do interior design and fashion design.
Okay.
And I was told, this is the university you're going to. If it's offering it, fine. And of course,
so they chose
there's
medicine
there's no interior design. Or rather, I don't know if it's there now, but at least when there's nothing like that in that whole booklet of courses offered by University of Nairobi. So I looked at all the courses and I think what I could do was medicine or pharmacy. And that's what I applied for. I got admission for both. And I went for medicine. Yeah. Medical school is a story for another day.
Cadavers
wasn't bad.
Okay.
Cadavers was actually not bad. It was scary the first day because you're like, oh my God. But looking at it, cadavers wasn't bad. I think for me, the heaviest rotation for me, I think, was obstetrics and gynecology, and I think witnessing the first delivery.
Okay.
I was like, what?
This is how life comes.
Am I seeing? What on earth is this? There's a point I was hiding behind the nurse. And she's like, come on. I'm like, no, I don't have door. But I mean, you go through it. When we went to Mathare for the first time, and I was like, wow, this looks interesting. And we went, by the time we were done with the rotation, I was like, I think this is what I like. I actually enjoyed my psychiatry rotation. A lot of medical students, that's one of their worst rotations. But for me, I actually really enjoyed a psychiatry rotation. So that's how then internship, then went back to school for psychiatry. Like for me, I knew by the time we're finishing internship, I was so sure of what I wanted to go back and do.
Okay.
That's the only time I was sure, at least now this time I didn't need any influencing. I was sure this is what I want to do, and yeah.
So right now you're based in Kisumu.
Jaramogi Oginga Odinga Teaching and Referral Hospital.
Also known as Russia.
I'm still grappling with where that name, the origin of that name still, that story doesn't make sense to me still.
The Russia one.
It still doesn't make sense to me, but I've accepted it, but it's still strange.
It is. I think apparently the Russians, the Soviets, are the ones who built the hospital, right? And so we just decided we are honoring them.
I still feel there's another reason, another story.
Okay.
You know how there's that Pangani story and then there's the real story? I actually feel like there's another story behind this Russia thing, but nonetheless, we'll take it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Jaramogi is nice. I wouldn't complain. I think I love my space.
Mm-hmm.
I love mental health. I wouldn't, like, some days are really heavy, not work-wise, but more mentally. Because, see, the thing with psychiatry, psychology, let me speak for psychiatry. Someone walks in, you have to have a conversation with them. They tell you about their childhood, they tell you about their current problems, work, family, and all that. And you have to listen, and you have to be very engaged in what they're saying. And this can take up to an hour sometimes, okay?
Yes.
And sometimes they tell you very heavy stories to a point where you yourself feel like, oh, wow, but you always have to keep a straight face. Then they leave. By the time they're opening the door like this, you need to clean that, come in the new canvas for the new patient.
Yes.
Okay? There's no time to, just absorb the emotions.
You don't have time to process your own emotions.
The next patient is already seated here.
Yes.
They're like, hello. Mm-hmm. And you're ready. That canvas aside, start afresh. Listen again to this person, a whole story, process. By the time the next one has come, you see, so it's just...
So how do you, at the end of the day, you've packed, say, 8 or 10 really convoluted and potentially tragic stories. How do you handle that? How do you handle yourself after that? Because you haven't processed.
Yeah.
And now at the end of the day, you probably can't even tell why you're feeling...
sad. There are days you even just feel sad and you're wondering... Or you're just feeling so drained.
Yes.
And if you're not careful, like I know when I was starting in the field, that used to happen a lot, and you wonder, why am I just feeling, just feel weird, and you don't know what's wrong. Everything is just okay. But there's just something, this feels off. And sometimes just those unconscious emotions that you've carried from all this
Yes.
day to day in. The interesting bit is the fact that the next patient probably came 2 weeks ago, and the minute they're sitting there, of course they expect you to remember. And so you have to have like so many compartments in your head of files. You know how we store files in the office?
Yes.
You also have to have like those compartments as well in your head. You're like, okay, remove who? This is who? Mary Jane. Okay. Mary Jane had an abusive father. And then because they come, they talk to you. They're not starting afresh because they told you that last time. You should be remembering it.
So question, do you take notes?
Yes, of course.
And when you take notes, do people feel a bit icked out when they see you referring to the notes like, hey, Yanni, you can't remember my story?
There are some who feel that way, but most don't.
Okay.
At times, at least for patients who give you some time to, before they walk in, at least you've had a chance to look at their notes.
Yes.
However, most I don't, unless they subconsciously do and they don't tell you, but most don't. For them it's rather you just look and then so that you don't have to ask them again. But of course, you can never miss those who will be like...
A bit. So question again,
Yes.
From what you're saying, and I keep trying to clarify this, so it does seem like you spend an hour with a patient typically, whereas that would sound to me like more of a psychologist's role.
For the first visit, you may spend up to 1 hour. For
Subsequent
visits, they become shorter. Some 10 minutes, some even 5 minutes. There's some will just come and tell you, I'll just come for medication. They don't even want stories. How are you doing? I'm okay. Are you sleeping well? Yes. Yes. Any problem? How's your mood? Good. Medication. Like
out.
Now I want okay.
Okay.
Here.
So earlier you'd mentioned you had been to Isiolo.
Yes.
What's the difference between Nairobi, say Mathare, Jaramogi, Isiolo, in terms of the sort of people who you've been handling?
Nairobi, very different. Nairobi, most of the clients who come would be a bit, and it's no offense to anywhere else, but a bit more knowledgeable about what is going on. So they've done a lot of research and then they're coming to you. It's a good thing and a bad thing because a lot come to you with this whole information from Google and whatnot. So they're telling you, so I read online that I have bipolar 3.
Self-diagnosis.
Like, okay, first of all, where did you remove that diagnosis?
Yes.
Some even come and tell you of some very weird concepts, and they're telling you that's the diagnosis they have. And if you remove that book of yours, you're like, there exists nothing like that. Again? There's the statistical manual for disorders. Yes. So when you remove that book, there's nothing like that. But they come and tell you this because they read it online. And I can as well decide to have my page online where I put all random things. So not everything that you find online is legit, you see. But the good thing, on the other hand, they'll be more open to like knowing and curiosity. So many times you'll find they know the medications they take, they know what the drug is doing for them, and such like things. Which is a good thing and a bad thing. Sometimes they feel like, okay, I know this drug I was taking because I was feeling low, and now I'm no longer feeling so low, so I stop it.
Okay.
The ones in Isiolo, a bit similar to Kisumu, but a bit different. Isiolo, I think, for me, was more of a culture. I wouldn't call it a culture shock, but a different culture for me altogether. What else would I say about it? It was just more of a different culture altogether.
Would you want to elaborate just a bit? I'm curious to know because so the culture would be due to ethnicity, due to religion, due to a combination of both?
Combination.
Okay.
Because there's the ethnicity is mixed. There's Bantus, I think Boranas, Kushites.
Yes.
The
Some
Boranas
interesting.
are Kushites.
Yes,
I don't even remember. I don't remember my history. Anyway, yeah. So it's a mix, but the mix religion, mix ethnic groups. So there are concepts that for you are off, but for them that's the normal. And you see, in psychiatry, I can't diagnose you with a disorder because it's abnormal to me. I also have to look at the context of the culture, because if it's normal in your culture, then who am I to come and say this is a disorder? You see, unless it has really moved overboard, it's clearly defined, like there are clear problems that have been defined as a disorder, meaning that now we have to diagnose the whole community, which is very unlikely, right? So there are things you have to learn that this is normal in this culture and it's okay for them, and that has nothing to do with mental illness. So yeah, and then being used to Nairobi, having patients come in chains, like the way you'd see them on TV, in chains on the legs, and they're being brought like that. Yeah, and the first day I was like, oh wow, this still happens, because those are the myths and not myths, those are the images we used to have about mental patients and stuff, which has over time been faded. But I was like, oh, this actually still exists in some parts of the world. So yeah, culture-wise.
So the interesting thing about the culture, and then we will transition now to
then also about the culture is, and probably it's a different, but this was my experience. I'm speaking from my experience. I don't want any backlash. I'm speaking about my experience. There's how men and women are treated very differently, especially in the career space. Yes, so I always used to feel like, the male colleagues would be treated a very different way from the female colleagues, me included, by the patients. A male colleague who's way junior than you would be called daktari, whatnot. They'd be like dada or sister, or you're just
yes,
you're just some person there, yet at that time you're probably the senior most person there, but yes. The fact that you're female, but anyway, that was just my experience.
So was it difficult to actually discharge your duties because of that sense of?
I think initially I struggled, but over time I
got the hang of it.
I stamped my foot. I was like, no, you call me sister. Me, I'm not your sister. No, I'm not your sister.
Okay.
I have my siblings and I know them.
And you know them.
And you're not one of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
About that cultural thing, this is a question I didn't even prepare for, but it's still an interesting thing to discuss. So you say that from a psychiatrist standpoint, you may see certain things which for you seem to be not okay, but culturally they are normalized and acceptable. There's a question that's always bugged me about human beings. Is there a baseline from which you can identify the most basic of human psychological needs, which regardless of culture must be met for a person to feel okay? Or is all of it relative?
I feel they're all... I would go with the more relative.
Mm-hmm.
What we would base now is what is not okay. Is now where we now say if you're feeling like we don't want everyone on a straight line. Like we say, unless you're smiling. For us to say you're okay, you have to be smiling. You have to be. For us, it's more of if this is not happening or this is how you're feeling, then there's a problem, rather than the other way of trying to...
So it would be like a subjective assessment. It has to be the patient to figure out whether they're feeling okay or not. Like you help, it's so if they're okay within a context, regardless of what you think, it is fine.
No, unless I'm not getting your question too well.
Oh, okay.
Unless I'm not getting your question too well.
So what I'm saying is, there was always in my mind this question about fundamental psychological needs.
Mm-hmm.
Are there certain things which, regardless of who you are,
mm-hmm.
if those things are not taken care of, you will not be okay,
yes.
regardless of the cultural context?
Yes.
And therefore, in certain cultures, those things are better met just because of how they do stuff. And then in some cultures, you reckon that these guys are just surviving. They're not okay, but they're just winging it. Can you make that determination as a psychiatrist?
Yes, and that's where we have, for example, to diagnose, let's say depression, it's not just one symptom that, you've been feeling sad, now you say you have depression. There are quite a number of symptoms, and also they have to sort of be affecting how you function on a day-to-day basis. They have to be affecting probably your social life. Different disorders have different criteria that have to be met for you to say that this person is not okay. Also, in the same breath, different cultures have different way of operating. For example, if you take a community like the one in Isiolo, it's a very communal society. Someone will not sleep hungry when there are people around. They share. It's a very communal society, which is a good thing and a bad thing, because, basic needs, food, water, blah, 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 they'll share. Okay? But then they also share, which I came to find out, things like mira, you don't have? Yeah. So you find also fighting drug abuse and stuff was that was also an area that needs to be looked at. But it's a good thing because fundamental basic needs are met. People who are in cultures are a bit more, like Nairobi here. If you don't have food, Jipang, that's your problem. That's not your neighbor's problem, unless you have a neighbor who's caring for you. But most of the time, you don't even know who your next door neighbor is.
Yes,
I stayed in a place where I didn't even know my neighbors at all. Yes. So if you are to sleep hungry, you'll sleep. If you have a problem, you're by yourself. So Basic human needs psychologically also. We are social beings. We need that social connection. Human beings don't exist as an island, you know. We need a social connection. So you see, such things can...
So if you don't get, I suppose a place like Nairobi, that's one of the things that many people don't have. You can have a lot of things. You can have a fancy house,
food,
big cars. You can have, but just someone to feel you.
Yes, and that's why you find, even when you look at demographics of disorders, to not always be the same thing. You can't say it's the rich that get depression or it's the poor that get depression. You'll find rich people who have depression and poor people who have depression because the demographics are they're different things that can cause different problems. So you see, like, someone who's living in Kibera can look at someone who's living in Lavington and say, but this man has everything.
Yes.
Why did he kill himself?
Yes.
Why? He has everything. You see, but our needs are very different. Yeah, you find someone who's living Madare slums, and that person is the happiest human being. They have
social connection. They have meaning.
Yeah.
They have a feeling of achievement.
Yes, within their space.
Yes.
Not to say that people who live in big houses do not. Of course, they also feel they have achieved it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's different. People have different needs, and they're just those basic things that have to be met for different people. And also it comes to do with your personality and all that. I mean, if you're a person who values human connection, when you don't have it, it becomes a concern. If you're a person who values career growth, career development, you lose your job, that becomes a significant stressor. So, I mean, mental health, I think, is a bit complex, that you can't just narrow and say what we say is we know what is not okay. This is a disorder and it's a clear disorder. Anything else beyond that, we can't put everyone on a straight line
and want them to...
Yes, everyone should work on this straight line. If you don't work on this straight line, then we admit you. No. So it's people need to know that it's okay sometimes not to be okay. What is not okay is if it takes too much time for you to get back on being okay. Yeah. Or if you're severely not okay, then that's a concern.
Okay. So I want us to now move to GBV. The first time I had GBV, I couldn't for the life of me make out what is GBV. And then somebody told me, gender-based violence. And then at that time, it was synonymous with a certain hospital in this here city. Every time there was a case around GBV, there was a certain hospital that would pop up on people's minds. I think they were thought of as some sort of specialist in that. Now, firstly, what is gender? We assume we know these things until you don't. Somebody might think they really know what gender is, but what is... it's a lot more sophisticated or nuanced than we think. Is that a good place to start? What is gender? And then the other question, which you can just, we can roll them up into one is, what is violence? Again, people assume that violence is somebody walking up to you and smacking you in the face. But again, it might be a lot more, subtle than that. Yes. So, yeah.
So many times we confuse sex and gender. So sex is your biological
hardware,
basically, if you can call it like that. And then gender can be your software. I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah. Yes. So gender is sex is phenotypically. Are you phenotypically male? Or let's call it, genotypic. Your genes, are you male or do you have male features or do you have female features, basically. Of course, we have hermaphrodites and whatnot, but who have both. But yeah, that's sex. That's not to be confused with gender. And I don't want to go to the nitty-gritties of gender because of the many debates that pop up from this.
Yes.
However, gender is how now you best identify, or rather fit into the societal expectation of your phenotypical expression.
Wow.
I don't know if I've made sense. Maybe I've just talked me on things.
You
but
know,
basically...
so let me crack a joke here a bit. So it's a bit sad, but there was this time when the Rwandese, during the genocide of 1994, and the UN was trying to come up with, to agree on whether or not it's a genocide. And it took forever for them to just come to the decision that it was a genocide. And guys were using all manner of fine words and just dancing around the subject. So anyway, I have that's on a light note. So so carry on kindly.
Yes. So in simpler words, the society expects that if you're born female, that's the sex that you are, right? If you're born female, you should identify with the female gender, all right? The female roles, the female behaviors, personality, habits. Your femininity should be more than your masculinity, all right?
Yes.
That is the societal expectation, all right? And then, so not the societal... Yes,
it is an expectation. I think.
Because that's how you find in the older days, girls would be expected to go to the river, fetch water, come home, cook, firewood, blah blah blah, take care of the kids, blah blah blah, get to a certain age, get married, have children, take care of your husband, take care of your children.
Agreed.
Right, and then the males would have their roles as well. So you're not ideal in the society. How the societal norms have been is a man, if you're born with XY, you're predominantly supposed to be more masculine than feminine. And that's how it's been. However, over time, there's been a lot of intertwining and all that, which I know the minute I start that conversation, the problems.
But, So how does it work out vis-a-vis when we are talking, okay, so at least that's clarified something around gender. I know there's some raging debate around that, and we won't get too drawn into it because apparently we are also living in an age where there's more opinion. There's no fact, there's only opinions. So sometimes it's impossible to really reconcile or find an acceptable position all across. But violence now, how do we define violence? And then now you will marry the two, gender and violence.
So violence, simple terms, is basically a form of either physical force or psychological torture aimed towards someone with the aim of hurting or killing or, just destruction, basically. So it's intentional, right? Many a times when you talk about violence, we just think about the physical aspect. We forget that emotional torture, psychological abuse is also a part of violence. Also, neglect can also be part of abuse. So yes.
Could you just...
So when we talk about gender-based violence...
Wait, before you go there, so emotional abuse, examples.
Example of
just so you mash it for guys. Examples of what
emotional
abuse look like.
Emotional abuse would be someone who either directly uses words which are demeaning, which are hurtful, to try and make you feel small, or for whatever reason, whatever their end goal is, but they're using words which are hurtful, they're using words which try and destroy your character, try and destroy your confidence. They can also be emotional abuse, can also be, you know how, and because you're speaking about gender-based violence, you know how you can be probably in a relationship or in a marriage or whatever, in a union, and there's that expectation for someone should be, I mean, it's expected that you should be showing love towards one another, right? So also that neglect of, I mean, there are things they need to be doing, they don't do it, and just find someone is just emotionally cold, they don't want to talk. I mean, those are things, because they know these are things, they're not beating you.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
But they know if I do this, it will hurt you. You know, I decide I'm not talking to you for the next 3 hours. For the next 3 days. You know, and they know that will hurt you, you know, or they decide they have disappeared. You don't know where they are. They know that will cause some emotional, that sort of anxiety, emotionally blackmail.
Yes.
If you leave me, I'll kill myself. Those sort of emotional blackmail also. It's emotional abuse as well.
So that is part of what violence is.
Violence, sometimes we interchangeably use with the word abuse.
Okay.
Yeah, but abuse can also include neglect and yeah.
So, all right. So now you can now go to gender-based violence. I think we have clarified the two.
So I think it's obvious. No. It's just basically.
So as we know,
violence,
like me wacha nikwambie tu ukweli. I know gender-based violence is just all these pictures of men beating women.
And that's a big misconception because for the longest while, I think because either women speak out more or women have been, what do you call them? Probably not, that's not the right word, but I'll just use it. The smaller beings in the society for a long while, right? So they have been victims of violence for the longest while. But as is, times have changed things a lot, where now we are finding men are now being victims of gender-based violence. So basically, gender-based violence is what we've defined violence as: the physical force, physical or psychological torture aimed towards someone because of their gender. All right? Mm-hmm. So I can beat you. Okay. So a man, so you can beat me just because you're a man, and you beat me because you're a man. You're more masculine. You can do these things because you're weaker than me. I can overpower you. It's more of, and violence has a lot to do with power and control. It's just power and control. I can.
So in under what circumstances is it the reverse? Like when do women? Because I don't know of a woman beating a man, except in certain parts of this country I'm told is prevalent. I won't name names, but
we have politicians who've come out. There's a famous politician, I will not say the name because I don't want to.
See, so once in a while, and what was their response there? Guys told him, dude, Ebu, style up. How did you let that happen?
And that's the sad part because currently men have been coming out a lot, and whenever they do, that is the response. Unachapajwe na mdem. Aje, azir.
How do I tell my neighbors? I mean, if
even the police, we were told, even the police,
yes.
They ask you, Eburudia, are you sure you're the one who beat, or she's the one who beat you? Yes. I mean, it happens. I think as a society, we still don't believe that men can be victims of violence. When this happens in the reverse is, for a lot of reasons, there are men who just will not, all right? So will just not raise a hand, whether it's to a woman, whether it's to a fellow man, the men who are just not. Their character does not involve violence. Okay,
I'm one of them.
as you say, we don't know, but we hope. Yes. Then the other thing could be if you're in as you said, sometimes violence is just power and control. So if you have a space where, see how the society has been, men have been the provider, the man has been the head of the home. Yes. So now when we get to a place where females are getting more financially empowered, they start now being the breadwinners of the house. I don't know if there's a psychological connection to that, I'm done bringing in this, then I'm the head, then I'm the one in charge, and you should do what I say, So if you don't do what I say, can as well, and then where will you go? Because I will beat you. Want to leave? Go. And then the person will look at this and say, I have nowhere else to go, or I'm depending on this person. So I feel also financial dependence has been one of the things that has been fueling some of this behavior. Because, if you find where a lot, not always, but a lot of the times, if you look at the dynamics, sometimes it's the women who are the breadwinners, if I can call it, in that space. So they feel, I'm in charge and I can beat you.
Sometimes it doesn't even have to be physical violence.
Yes.
It can be. And I'd imagine somebody said about women that basically because men are bigger, like you say, stronger, maybe more aggressive physically, women know not to necessarily, fight.
Yeah.
But what they do is they weaponize language, and then they weaponize other forms of, isn't it? So
yes.
they will cut you to pieces with their tongues,
yes.
and or that the Cold War and
And women are known that the tongue.
Acerbic, acid.
Acid.
Okay.
But the other thing, as you said, sometimes women will not fight physically, but there's this funny joke that is made about Kenyan women that when you argue with them, it gets to a point they tell you niue, because they know you won't touch them. Niue, niue. Kama we ni mwanamume niue. You see, and they're challenging you.
Yes.
If you're a man, of course you know you're a man, and there's no, but the tongue again.
It's the tongue, isn't it? Because if you act on it, woe unto you. That's probably the end of a lot of things for you as well. Yeah. So in terms of gender, how does and now mental health, perhaps that's a place we should explore a little. So violence, generally speaking, has mental health ramifications. There is a physical violence. The obvious outcome is often it's just physical injury. But what does it do to a person?
Psychologically?
Yes.
So, of course, whenever it can be mild and can be very extreme, the effects. They can be short-term, they can be long-term. So the mild could be just the psychological distress. Someone feels sad, maybe they cry at the moment, they feel maybe isolated or, for that brief period, and then they probably snap back. But then it can also range to the extremes now where we get severe mental disorders, things like severe PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Sometimes we use abbreviations,
yes,
assuming everyone knows everything. So you can get severe depression.
What is post-traumatic stress disorder? It's good to educate.
I feel like this is deja vu. But anyway, post-traumatic stress disorder is basically a mental illness that occurs. We usually give it a period of 1 month after one has gone through a severe life-threatening traumatic event. That could be either directly or witnessing something that was life-threatening. So in the case of domestic violence or gender-based violence, someone could have beaten you to the extent where you felt like you were about to die. Yeah, maybe they choked you and, you felt like you had to fight and gasp for breath, or you just had to fight to stay alive, So with that, you find, with the disorder, you find the patients, or rather the person, let me not call them the patient, the person has difficulty sleeping because they keep getting this nightmares, flashbacks of the event. They keep getting memories of what happened. If someone passes through with something that sort of reminds them of that day, they can get very overwhelmed. Some certain noises, maybe a plate falls down, they get very easily scared because they feel, so they're easily startled, they're overly over the edge. They need to look out for themselves. They need to always be in a space where they want to protect themselves. So they feel overly on the edge. Then the other thing is they avoid conversations, they avoid spaces, they avoid anything that could potentially remind them of that. But you see, the unfortunate bit is they need to process that memory adequately for them now to be able to function the way other people are functioning.
Typically, how do you process that memory?
Through therapy.
Okay,
Yeah.
And for those, and that would be like coming to
Yes.
Daktari here
Yes,
for
yes,
50
yes.
sessions.
Yes, that is
Now, what
that is for those who meet the criteria for post-traumatic stress disorder. Because not everyone who goes through a traumatic event will get
to that
post-traumatic. Point. Yes, so that's why we give it a period, because we assume, or rather the assumption is, the reality on the ground is, if something has happened to you, there's no way you'll just get over it. That is also not normal. There's no way you've had a traumatic event today and you're just okay tomorrow.
You have to go through the processing
yes.
So you give a period for
about a month. So within that month, even if you're having flashbacks, no one will treat you per se. You still be given a watch period, to just process the emotion, because your brain is also traumatized by that. It's in a shock. This is not normal for it, so it has to process that. And then, if within a month you're still having severe symptoms, then that's where we now decide based on what you present with, because even that has mild and severe forms of it. So they'll all have different ways in which they're managed.
And now there we are talking about physical violence. Mostly. Like when we're talking about PTSD, I'm down with the jargon.
Yes.
We've talked about physical violence, but is it possible for somebody to get PTSD from non-physical violence?
To be with the ideal definition as it is, from if you open the book, it doesn't put emotional violence, but from what we see in the ground on practice, there is PTSD from emotional violence. Because a lot of times you'll find people have this thing of, you sit somewhere, just sitting and remembering all these bad things that were said to you. Was it life-threatening? No. Okay, but it's still affecting you on a day-to-day basis. Okay, it's probably affecting your confidence, how you relate with people. It probably make you more isolated because of things that were said to you that made you feel probably less of a person, or made you feel like a failure, and all those things.
If somebody was to speak to you or repeatedly treat you just through, verbally and in ways in which it can lead you to even contemplate committing suicide, would you consider that to be potential PTSD? Like they've been able to get you to that point? Like,
I think I lost you a bit because you mentioned the word committing suicide. Sorry. I'm an advocate for that. It's die by suicide.
Oh, there is that. Explain. It's good to educate us, like I said. What's dying by suicide and committing suicide? There's a difference.
Yes.
In the tone or the.
It's because we're pushing for the decriminalization of suicide, right? And when you commit something, you commit a crime.
Oh, so in that sense, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
so we're trying
to say die by suicide, which
yes.
then means
It's a death.
see.
So you died from hypertension, you died from cancer. So you also
can die
from
by your
suicide.
own hands, and which is not. So if somebody was to through their actions, which are not violent, like physically, but they push you to that point where you're actually contemplating taking your own life. Would it be possible for you to be diagnosed with PTSD on account of their behavior? Is that violence? Is that I'm just exploring a thing there, because it is possible for people to do things without hurting you physically, but they can really push your buttons. And I wonder whether how you would.
Okay, I don't know if I got the question right.
Yes.
Someone talks to you, or rather their actions push you to contemplate suicide?
Yes. Would that be... Would you be able to diagnose that person as having suffered PTSD on account of that person's interacting with that person in that way? Or that's not exactly how it works?
That's not exactly how it works. However, you need to assess that person. From what you're saying, that could also be as a result of depression, because gender-based violence can also cause depression. Severe depression can also lead one to contemplate suicide. So PTSD has more to do with the flashbacks, the avoidance behavior, the anxiety, the being easily startled and being on the edge. Depression now will have more of the feeling low, feeling sad, then, feelings of guilt, sometimes even of things you've not done, and yes, feeling hopeless, worthless, and all that, which now may push one to contemplate suicide. So I don't know.
I see. Yeah, I think you've clarified. I think you've clarified.
But sometimes we also find patients who have both. So again, it will depend from person to person. You can find someone who has depression and they also have PTSD.
Okay. So,
because we said earlier, there's a criteria that one has to, so that you don't go around diagnosing everybody with a diagnosis somewhere, because so you have to meet a certain criteria. It may be negotiable from patient to patient that you meet, but I mean, so that we don't, if you go to this doctor and you move to the next doctor, the diagnosis probably still be the same, because there's a clear guideline on how to diagnose disorders.
So, GBV, the prevalence one, and the causes, typically, from your point of view.
Prevalence, I had mentioned maybe what is there by WHO. That is about 30% of our women who have been abused by their partners at one point in their lives. Is it higher on the ground? I probably think so. Because
you said women, not about men.
Men, we don't have statistics. Statistics are not reliable. As we said, currently, even to some policemen, you go report GBV, they don't take you seriously.
Okay.
You see, so now getting ideal statistics on the men's side, I think we still have a long way to go.
But you said on the ground, it's probably higher?
It's probably higher.
Because people don't feel like reporting.
Maybe not, feel may not be the word exactly, but maybe as a society for the longest while, we have normalized GBV. In the older days, there used to be this, I don't know which community it was, but they'd say, when your husband beats you, it's a sign of love.
Yes.
It must be yours.
No, it's not. But there is that story, yes. Yeah. So apparently some women would actually go out and act out so that they get a bit of a smackdown.
Or even if they do, they not report it, because that is okay, that is normal. So with people now coming out to know that this is actually wrong, this is This is violence. This should not be happening. So now you get people reporting. But you still have people who are still in that space for...
looking for a bit of excitement.
He loves me, you know?
Okay. So that is... and would you say it's more prevalent? GBV is like... In terms of demographics, if you're looking at, say, the rural-urban... are the younger people, say millennials, are they less likely to be more... What do you think about the generations and GBV? The older people, more of it, millennials, or what do you think are the factors at play there?
I don't have the exact statistics, so I wouldn't say that this is a fact. But I'll give my opinion on this one. I think in the older generation, as I said, the way the society had it, when you bwana kikuchapa, hiyo ni mapenzi, you know. So that has been the space. And women will not say or do anything about it. Would women be the ones beating their men? Very less likely, right? Then now, as empowerment has happened, girl power, over time, you start finding maybe the demographics the gap starts closing up, right? Such that now we have more men as before compared to before now being victims of gender-based violence. Millennials, I don't know if I fall under millennial, I wouldn't know. But we've had cases of this passion crimes and all that.
Could you explain what that is?
This love suicides and homicides, where you at the news you hear a man kills his girlfriend and then kills himself because of that, yes, because of a love triangle gone bad or something like that. So we're having a lot of that in this current generation. Was that there before? Probably not as much, because we used to have the union, the family, the institution of family, you know, and this was this man's wife, except some communities which was allowed. A man's wife is that man's wife, you know, and that was that. Right now, before people, what we're having is not even marriages, it's a man kills girlfriend.
Yes, it's always girlfriend, and maybe he's invested quite a bit of his own resources in the girl.
Yes.
I was listening to something interesting earlier today where I say that guys tend to love women for who they are. Women tend to love men for their value. For what they have, yes. So what would happen is if he doesn't have everything, she will crowdsource. That's the problem. to get her, you know, everything she needs. And when this guy then finally discovers, because he had literally sort of laid his life on the line for her, he loses it. He can't comprehend such betrayal. Yes,
and I think also nowadays the violence, we are taking it. You know, probably someone would just beat you and then leave you, and you know. But then now people are going to the extremes of actually killing.
Yes. What do you think is happening there?
I think it's lack of emotional control, one. But then also, we had a meeting yesterday with the media. We're talking about this reporting, how they report some of these crimes and especially violence. So I see, those guys were having, there was a love triangle, and then that man killed this one and then killed himself. And that's how he sorted that out. So for some people, in that heat of the moment, that looks like a very reasonable solution. Cool. I saw it on TV. This is what people do. She cheats on you, uayeye. Actually, the time there's a lady who was killed by her boyfriend in Moi. Don't know if you remember.
I remember the gentleman who drove all the way to Eldoret.
The medical student. And online, people were like, yes, why was she picking his heel? So you see, by the time people are agreeing to that, it means that if they were in the same situation, that's exactly what they'd also do. So it's also how we interact as a society, and we are normalizing violence. And it's like, if you spend on a girl and she's not reciprocating, or you find her with another man, kill her. But that's not the solution. So, I think as a society, you probably need to do a bit
of soul searching there.
Better, yes, in terms of what was okay before. Times have changed, and we now need to, also change with the times, and now normalize what should be normalized, and actually speak out on what is wrong. Because, why would we be normalizing such conversations?
Okay. Which brings me to the factors that generally sort of trigger GBV or sort of flames, what are some of the things that generally, if they're prevalent in a certain setting, would make GBV more create more GBV?
I think the very obvious one is when alcohol and drugs are involved. Substance use. You find whenever you have a family where there's maybe the father using, father or mother, not to be biased, using alcohol or drugs, then because of that loss of judgment when intoxicated, that can happen. Homes where I feel like this financial a very big financial gap, because you'll find it's a risk factor, not that it happens all the time, but you find someone feels, I can do this. There's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing you can do about it. You'll still stay here because you need me. All right. So that's financial gap as well. I also feel probably upbringing. If you have someone who came from a home where violence was okay, the one new thing, this is okay, this is women should be beaten, or men should be beaten. That is, what's the big deal about it if that's where they came from?
Yes.
Yeah, so background check is usually also very, very, very important to do.
Yes, I think in the past they used to, the first thing you'd be asked, ni mtoto wa nani? And then they would find out, kutoka wapi? And then you'd have a whole thing there, isn't it? Yeah, so these days I think we just, we hope love will cure everything. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other?
Predominantly characteristic as well of the person that you're with. If you find there are people who just have this control nature, and I use a term people like throwing around on the street, this narcissistic tendencies. Someone who just loves being in control. Things have to go their way or the highway. If it's not my way, things will go off. All right? That is already a very ideal setup, someone who cannot control their anger.
Imagine you combine that with alcohol.
And then you combine
yes.
So, also, people need to know how to, as a couple, how to fight, like healthy fighting, if I can call it, healthy arguing. It's not you against me. It's both of us against the problem. What is the problem here? Then we know how to tackle that. Otherwise, if it's you against me, then it will be who's the bigger person. Again, as we said, violence, power, and control. So who's the bigger person? I'll tell you. I'll show you.
Then you use whatever you have. If
it's
I'm
your
a
words,
man, I will. I'll want to smack you against the wall. If it's a girl, she'll lash out at you with her tongue or whatever she can do. New ways. Isn't it?
Yeah, if you're a man.
Or she'll go and start screaming downstairs how dumb you are or something. Yeah, okay. So in terms of mitigation, what can we do to, firstly, as part of, as we now sort of bring this to a close, some of the things we can do first to gain a little more awareness around this, get a handle on it, and also to mitigate the risks. That in terms of GBV, we did speak about psychological sort of the impact on a person, but we didn't also, maybe you also want to consider the impact of the people around, isn't it? So there is me and you, we are fighting, but there is also that impact on people around, which sometimes is also something to keep in mind. So, so just as we bring this to a close, touch a bit on raising awareness, why we need to be aware, how we need, and then some of the things we can do as a society to mitigate. And then we will maybe touch a bit on if you are a victim, utafanya.
You'd have some mild attention. You ask me one question at a time. But it's okay. I've gotten them. I've gotten them. Okay, so effect of GBV on, you said, so there's the individual who can have, we said, from mild psychological discomfort to a spectrum of things to the severe mental illnesses. So they can fall anywhere in that space. Now to the people around them, and the most affected, especially if it's a family setup, are usually children. And what happens is children who come from broken homes tend to be very disturbed. Okay. They need to know, children need to be in a space of love, okay, as they're growing up. And that is what they'll pick. These are the behaviors now that they'll pick as they grow up. Then, as we said, they become a man or a woman later. They'll be also either victims again of violence, or they'll be perpetrators of violence. Yeah. So the children are usually the most affected. They can have depression as well. Sometimes we don't think children process some of these things or understand some of these things, but they see and they process them in the way they best know how. And of course, they can now also start having mental issues. Yeah. So you also asked about how, as a society, we can mitigate.
We can mitigate. So we need to raise awareness. You have any views on how best we can raise awareness?
I think where it starts somewhere. Conversations, platforms like this usually help. We also have programs that have been there for quite some decades. Matters raising GBV, as we said before, it was normal, right? And then now of late, people are now starting to realize this is actually not okay. And it started with conversations, research, and things like that to push for people to know when you're beaten. That's not love. Someone that loves you will not abuse you. So raising awareness on this is important. Also, on the aspect of GBV towards men, as a society, we need to be more empathetic, because what happens whenever a man talks about GBV online, my God, it will trend.
We start with giggling.
And it will trend on a negative aspect. It will not trend for hashtag stop the violence. It will trend with hashtag something like what a simp,
yes.
you know, or
yes,
like one blogger says kinuthia, you know. It will trend with such things, you know. It will not be on a positive light. But as a society, we need to be empathetic. That's the only way victims who are going through GBV will come out and reach out and say, you know what, I am going through this. We need to stop normalizing violence. You know, we need to. It's not okay for someone to, you know, slap you, to punch, to throw tables, to throw what. You know, that's not normal. So we need to speak up about it. I mean, stop minimizing. And someone comes out to their story and you're like, yeah, got a simbaya. You know, so and so was killed. You know, so you're minimizing my story, and my story is also as legit as anybody else's. I mean, just because someone else died doesn't mean that I have to die for now you to pay attention. You know?
Ilikuwa ni coffee tu.
Yeah, coffee. We hata ujui sisi tunapigwa na bado tunakaa. You see, you're normalizing violence. You know, and that's not how it should be. Yeah. Yes. So as a society, we need to call out crime, because it's crime. We need to call out crime for what it is.
Okay. And when you're a victim, what do you do? Who do you go to? How do you sort yourself out?
All right. So it's usually quite a challenging space, and different people respond differently. Different people will go to different agencies, if I may call it, or rather authorities. There are those who want to probably approach their friend first and tell them. There are those who probably want to go back home. Me, I've packed my bags and I've gone back home now. And they go sort out things at home. Does it help? Sometimes they are returned back to the same place. There are those who go to the police. There are those who reach out to the professionals. So I think what's important first is recognizing that there's a problem. Before you recognize there's a problem, it will be very difficult for you to seek help. Okay? So you can start anywhere from home, family. You can start from the authorities, the police. We have a hotline for GBV, a national GBV hotline, 1195. It's also a good place to start if you feel maybe I've gone to the police, or if I'm too far to go to the police, or if I go to the police, they'll not help me, or if I go home, there'll be no one to help me. That's a good place to start. You can get a safe space. The organizations that do safe space, brief space, like us, while you figure out, or while we are figuring out things, as a space where you can stay there temporarily. Kenyatta National Hospital, our main hospital, also has a GBV center where you can also visit for help. There are different professionals, from psychiatrists to counselors to, in case it was a sexual, because GBV can also be sexual, there's also a space for that. There's also a police there. Those police have been, they're more welcoming. They'll not be those ones of mwana umepigwa. No, they'll not be like that. So yeah, Kenyatta National Hospital also has a good GBV. For those who are probably not in Nairobi, most hospitals, county hospitals, will have a GBV response center, where you'll find someone who will assist you with either connecting you to the right kind of resources for you to get help. Matters maybe if you had to follow the legal way, blah blah blah, and also medication, therapy, etc.
It's interesting. You spoke about something which we have almost completely ignored in this conversation, which is sexual violence's GBV. And for the most part, at least to my mind, whenever we think GBV, we think about men pummeling women or rape. as, and then the others sort of are peripheral. I think sexual violence is a major component of GBV, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it stems not only from the physical act of we call it penetration, but even things to sexual harassment, and many a times just as GBV has been over time, it's been men towards women. But right now we are having it the other way around. And whenever a man speaks about something like that online, the other men would be like, and you're complaining. Mimi ningekuwa nimefurahi. And they'll be like that, when someone can speak out about GBV, sexual violence as a man, they get ridiculed as well. And that's what I'm saying. We need to stop normalizing violence in the society.
Yeah. I remember this at those days, a long time back in a PSV, where some guy just, he's in a bar, some random girl, and he just pinches her bum, and it's supposed to be perfect. Like, this should be fun for you, isn't it?
Well, someone said
it was very, as far, I think he was doing it very innocently. Like, this should be fun. Oh. So when you're outraged, you surprise them that they don't see the violation at all. So and then I was telling my daughter recently about how she will have to get used to enduring just walking down the street and being catcalled, and guys just really, and it's very intrusive, there are no boundaries there, but it's a thing you have to get used to. I suppose for women maybe it's a lot more, they're more vulnerable in that way.
And it's what goes back down to the society. It's what we've normalized. We've normalized that walking down the street, it's okay for men to call you, hey, mrembo. And then when you don't answer, they start telling you, atawesi mrembo. You see, and it's just, and we've normalized it, as in, and it's just sad. As a society, we need to stop normalizing violence. That's the only way, that's the biggest way we can actually mitigate a lot of this violence, or rather the victims, reducing the victims of violence.
Okay, so I think that this would be a fantastic place to bring that bit about GBV to a close. We still have a bit more to grill you over, but we would, at this point, perhaps we take a bit of a break.
Yes.
We will fill your cup with more hot water. And then we resume and look at childhood trauma. I don't know whether that is generally a good plan.
Very good. I need more hot water.
All right.
Like a whole thermos.
So, thank you.